Well, Sabina, thanks for chatting with me today. I know you're an engineer, you're a speaker, and a well-known advocate for green energy. Tell me, what is it about hydrogen that gives you hope today?
Well, that's a great question because I've been in this industry for so long now. I think I started in 1997, so 27 years. And I think what gives me hope today is probably the same thing that attracted me to first work in fuel cells and hydrogen in the first place. And that I see hydrogen being used in a fuel cell, like in an electrochemical device, and making clean zero emission electricity is such a sort of a beautiful scientific process that mimics a lot of what happens in nature. And so, what gives me hope is it's been a long and hard journey, but I'm really seeing that I think sometimes it just takes what it's going to take. And I thought this would happen a lot faster, but now that I'm working at HTEC developing infrastructure, I'm seeing real world users of hydrogen fuel cell electric vehicles that are zero emission at the tailpipe, they're fast to fill, and the drivers just love the experience of driving these vehicles. Whether it's a port worker who says, I don't come home smelling like diesel when I drive, a fuel cell electric yard truck, or it's my daughters driving our fuel cell electric car, and they're so proud of this car and cool it is to drive. It's got such great pickup and features inside. So it gives me hope to see these end users that are really appreciating the benefits, not just because of the environmental attributes, but all the other things these vehicles bring.
That's so true. And I think that's really what hits mass appeal when you hit that point, right? Where there are a lot of other things to enjoy about it, not just the purpose behind it.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Now, do you feel like the scale up of hydrogen is essential in order to tackle climate change?
I do. I mean, I was lucky enough, before I joined HTEC, I had a consulting company called Zen Clean Energy Solutions, and we worked with the Canadian federal government on the hydrogen strategy for Canada. And that was the first time I really understood, the challenges of hitting net zero by 2050. And when I look at the scale of energy use today and where our energy comes from and how much is still dependent on fossil fuels, and as much as we're trying to increase direct electrification as much as we can, and introduce biofuels as well. When I look at the role for hydrogen, it's a really significant role. It has to be. There's just not that many ways to deliver energy in a carbon-free way. So I think we need really large scale. I think, though, we have to be careful not to just think, it's so big and daunting to get to that end state. It's really important that right now we're taking steps along the way that are maybe smaller scale, but they're working in a smaller scale ecosystem as a whole. So yeah, it has to be scaled up, but we can't wait for that big scale. We have to be taking steps to it right now.
Oh, that's so true. I mean, you had mentioned a little bit about the projects that you've worked on and use even in your own home. And I love that technical side that you explore or have always explored in your career, but you also have experience in commercialization. And I know with a lot of green energy or other sort of climate friendly products or technologies, a lot of people boo-hoo it because they think it's a tough business or that profit is too far off. What do you say to those people?
The commercialization of a technology like this, where you're displacing an incumbent, whether it's gasoline or diesel or natural gas, it's really hard. And you'd hope that people are seeing the climate emergency that's right here in our face. It's not years away. We're seeing signs of it every day now with forest fires and heat waves, heat domes in Vancouver, atmospheric rivers, all these things that are new terms that we didn't even know a few years ago. And you would hope that people just are saying we need to do the right thing. But in reality, people have to make ends meet. You got parts of the country here, even in Canada, that are living in energy poverty. And so what we have to do is really look at where do the economics work best today and really focus on getting adoption happening in those markets. And, at HTEC, we're focused on hydrogen as a transportation fuel. And part of the reason why is because of the economics and the ability to commercialize with the economic environment we have today. So diesel and gasoline are more expensive than natural gas on a dollar per gigajoule basis. And we have policies in place, like federally in Canada, the Clean Fuel Standard, or in British Columbia, the Low Carbon Fuel Standard. We have ZEV mandates. So there's policies driving both supply and demand and adoption in transportation that help the economics work. But I also look at it like if you use a kilogram of hydrogen, you want to use it the most efficient way you can. And so if you're putting it into a fuel cell, you get this efficiency bump where, in a light duty vehicle, you get 2.5 times the efficiency compared to a combustion engine. And that directly helps the economics of the transition. And so I think it's great people are talking about industrial uses like, high grade heat for industry or steel production. But I look at that and you're going to burn the hydrogen. You don't get the energy efficiency boost. You got a cheap incumbent energy source. And I wonder, how do the economics work today with the current price we put on carbon? I see how they work in transportation, and that's why we're focused on that. But I think it's really important we recognize like the current policies and incentives and economic environment as well as the trying to get to.
It's a must. And I like the way that you framed that. And speaking of some of that, you are speaking at hy-fcell Canada this June in Vancouver. And your session is about financing hydrogen projects. It seems really timely, and I'd love to know more about that too.
Yeah, I have to admit, I'm a little outside of my comfort zone on that one, but at the same time, it's so relevant to my job today. So, at HTEC, I'm leading, right now we have 3 really large capital projects in my group, ranging from kind of 30 million-ish, for a electrolysis facility up to several hundred million for a big liquefaction facility. And I spend a lot of my time looking at how we're going to finance these large capital projects, and we're financing projects that are serving a market that's not mature. And so a lot of these project financing groups judge a new project like a liquefaction facility the same way they look at a natural gas pipeline, And so I think it's such an important topic to talk about is how do you finance projects that are really critical for this energy transition? They're needed to meet our decarbonization goals, but they're serving markets like us. We're making fuel for a transportation market that is just getting off the ground. And so that offtake certainty you might have in a conventional power project or pipeline project is just not there. And so how do you make it happen? And I think there's a really critical role from, private industry like ourselves, the project developers and owners, from federal and provincial government, from private capital, and from the banking, the bankers, and the ones going out and trying to piece these deals together. And so I'm super excited about the panel because we're going to have that cross section speaking together practically about what is the true state, not the rosy picture, but what is the true state of financing these today? What do we need to do to get these projects across the line? And how do we have to work together with some new ideas? And I think they're relevant not just to hydrogen projects, but any clean energy projects.
Oh, I can't wait for that. That's going to be great. And to have that full panel together and, like you said, see every aspect of it, because I'm sure you've seen in your career, partnership is everything with projects like these and in an industry like this, right?
Absolutely. Yes.
Oh.
Collaboration, partnerships, building trust and relationships over many years and having the passion to keep going together when it's hard. But absolutely.
I love how you're a big advocate for women, especially in this sector. What would you like to say to women who maybe are considering getting into green energy, and how are you trying to uplift their voices?
Yeah, that is such a good question. It's funny. I was just thinking about it today. Because I'm on a panel next week about women in energy, and just sort of thinking through. It's a very personal story we're telling next week at this panel. And I was remembering back to one of my first mechanical engineering classes where I got to it was the first day of this class, and I got there a little bit early, and the prof looked at me walk in and said, "Oh, I think you're probably in the wrong room." And I don't know why that came to mind, but, I was thinking, we've come a long way. And, for me as a mechanical engineer and in the energy industry, there's been times when it has felt really lonely. And I'm so proud of the diverse team that, we've managed to build here at HTEC. But there's always so much more to do. I've got a daughter who's just graduating from McGill this year, and she's getting into sustainability. And It's really, really important to me, that we keep talking about having more diversity and inclusion from the working project teams to the boardroom. And I think that there is a lot of work still to do. For me personally, I'm at a different stage in my career where I'm thinking more about what legacy am I going to be leaving behind for people like my daughter versus what are my ambitions personally. And so I'm just really, really passionate about starting to maybe put my neck out there a little bit more. And I always had this philosophy is that I'll just work really hard and show that we deserve to be here. And now I'm like, I'm going to talk more explicitly about some of the progress we've made and some of the challenges we still have. And there's just so much more work to do on that front. I'm going to keep talking about it, keep encouraging women. This is an industry that you can feel such a strong sense of purpose being part of. I think women think a lot about children and underrepresented and what emissions, you look at where diesel emissions are heavy, it's in disadvantaged communities often. And so, you can make a change not just at the global level from greenhouse gas emission reduction and climate change, but even making communities have healthier air for kids to breathe. And there's so many different ways women can participate from, being really highly technical, like how I started my career, but participating in even awareness and engagement and kind of using our intuitive and high EQ that tends to be there for women to drive that change. So I would just say there's a lot of opportunities. It's not always easy, but I just really hope more and more women keep coming to this sector and helping to make the change that we need to see happening.
Oh, I do too. And it's so nice to hear your daughter will be part of that.
Yeah, I'm so excited. I'm so proud of her for picking up the torch and keeping going.
What's on your radar for the future?
Say for me personally, I'm really excited about some of these big projects we're just getting into construction on. So I've been at the product development stages of the fuel cell technology that's at the heart of these end use applications. I've worked in policy. And for me, just realizing the build and construction of some of these larger projects and seeing them operating where I live in British Columbia and, serving this community that really is the cradle of a lot of Canada's fuel cell and hydrogen activity. So I'm very excited about the next 2-3 years as we're seeing these facilities coming online. For the industry, it's really interesting. As I mentioned, I was in Edmonton this week earlier at the Canadian Hydrogen Convention, which attracts a different crowd than hy-fcell. And I think both conferences are so important. But you see a lot of the big energy players getting involved. There was a lot of big project developers for the export markets. And the scale that they're talking about is, it's really big. And so I'm looking forward to seeing some of these big projects getting to FID, final investment decision, where there's less talk and more action. And, these projects are really getting off the ground because it feels like there's still a lot of talk, but it's good. That's where it starts. And I'm hoping to see some of these kind of mega projects being built out in the next decade.
Oh, that's great. And then that momentum will help carry everything forward.
Absolutely. That export market helps serve the domestic market as well. And it attracts new jobs and, people who are working in traditional oil and gas. It gives a pathway to a new kind of job where they're still providing energy, but in a different way for the country. And so, yeah, it's exciting to see how that could definitely build momentum and scale.
Well, I loved having this conversation. Is there anything else you want to share, Sabina?
I really want to thank you for taking the time today. And I think it's so important that we get the message out there. And I hope to see lots of the people watching in Vancouver at hy-fcell in June.
Oh, great. Me too. Well, thanks, Sabina, and have a great weekend.